Hey, what's up, Terra Nova? Welcome indoors on a Sunday morning. For the first time since July, I believe, if I'm doing that math. We've actually gone through 7 different configurations we figured out over the last year, and this is the latest. I'm really happy about it. We had a great group here last night, outdoors, sundown Saturday night. It was chilly, and a wonderful group of people here, and now you guys are here. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being online with us on Facebook, if you're watching on Facebook. Hey, before I jump in, I just want to draw attention to something. I want to give a shout out to everybody who has been serving on one of our teams over the course of the last year, because we have had a group of people who have served consistently through this entire year, and yet we have not had a serve sign-up opportunity in over a year. That means the people who have been serving from Supernova Kids to guest services and so forth are people who signed up in 2019. Hello, so let's give them a round of applause, all right? We couldn't exist without you, and one of the reasons why I'm telling you this is because we've been running in your program a flyer for the last few days, or for the last few weeks, I'm sorry, and this is the last weekend that we're running this. It's called Fab 4, and it's an opportunity to sign up. It is the first opportunity we've had, again, since 2019. We're opening the gates again for more people to join us, and it's so important because as we're anticipating what God wants to do through us going into the summer and connecting with more and more people, we want to have great teams. Our new children's pastor, new Supernova Kids pastor, Angela Bruggeman, is going to be here in just 2 weeks. How many of you met Angela at the Women's Breakaway event? A bunch of you. Amazing lady. So excited to have her on our team. We want to have a great team of Supernova Kids volunteers to work with her, that she can build up, hit the ground running, so that you can sign up for that. We want to build up our guest services teams stronger, and you can join one of our guest services teams. We need great teams to reset and clean up, especially on Saturday, by the way. If you're kind of a Saturday inclined person, we need stronger teams to set up for that and take everything back down and put it away after our Saturday sundown service. So you can sign up for that. And meals, we're rebuilding our meals team as well. And so there are lots of ways to serve. This is the last time you're going to see this flyer. And so I just want to say, hey, we need you. We need you to help make Terra Nova happen for others. Would you please, during our gathering today, just take a little time, think about that, and check off a couple boxes. You can throw this whole flyer in the baskets on your way out. More on that towards the end, but there you go with that. So hey, last weekend we kicked off this series, Winning the War in Your Mind. The subtitle is Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life. It is a series about the greatest and most important battle that you and I will fight, and it's one that we fight every single day of our lives. It's a series, we said last week, that will make it better for anyone who's on the other side of you. And just as important, it is a series that will make it better to be on the inside of you, because this last year has been hard on the mind. Am I right? This last year has been hard on my mind. Anybody else with me? Yeah, so many people I've talked to have said, yeah, my thoughts just stuck in cycles of anxiety, despair, sadness, grief, anger, frustration, paranoia, fear, depression, and so forth. And that is not good. It is not good for our minds to be stuck in those cycles, because, as we said last week, the lives we live are a reflection of the thoughts that we think. The lives that we live are actually a reflection of the thoughts that we think, including those dark, anxious, fearful, negative thoughts. Here's what that means. The families that we raise are a reflection of the thoughts that we think. That makes your thoughts very important. The marriages we have or serious relationships we have are a reflection of the thoughts that we think. The jobs that we do, the moods that we feel, the conflicts that we experience, the outcomes that we keep getting are all expressions of the thoughts that we think. Now, that idea right there flies in the face of a very common, very compelling, and very pervasive myth that says, oh, no, the life I live is a result of my circumstances. The life I have it's a result of my DNA, it's a result of my genetics, it's my family of origin, it was my parents, it was the things that have happened to me in my childhood, in my past, the things that are happening to me right now. The life I have is actually a reflection of my circumstances. Influential psychologist Albert Ellis, who's the father of rational emotive behavioral therapy, called this the greatest illusion in life. He said, the great illusion in life is that the things that happen to me determine what comes out of me. It's the things that happen to me that determines what comes out of me. And he described what he called the ABCs of emotional life. And this is something we've talked about before, but it's so pertinent, it's so important to this series. We're bringing it back again to talk about it a little bit more. The ABCs of emotional life. And here's what Albert Ellis says. He says, the A stands for the activating event. This is the trigger. This is the thing that happened. Somebody looked at me sideways. Somebody said something. Somebody didn't do what I wanted them to do. I got a bad grade on my test. There was a trigger, there was an activating event, and the C stands for the consequence. This is the outcome. This is how I ended up feeling. This is my negative feelings and reactions, my behaviors, my facial expression, my mood, my attitude, the things I ended up saying, how I reacted, the consequences, or how I reacted to the activating event. He says the great illusion in life is that the things that happen to me, my circumstances and so forth, actually control what comes out of me. And we use this language all the time. We say things like, that made me feel, fill in the blank. You made me feel, that made me feel. It made me feel this way. You think I want to feel this way? You think I want to be acting this way? You think I want to be doing this right now? It made me, right? That made this happen. So if good things are happening to me, right? If good things are happening, I got a promotion, I got a raise, awesome. Somebody complimented me, things went the way I wanted them to go, I'm having a good day, then I feel good. I feel good, I'm in a good mood, it's a good day. But if bad things happen, someone criticizes me, somebody doesn't like what I'm wearing, somebody doesn't do what I wanted them to do, I get a bad grade on that test, I experience a loss, well then I feel down. I'm in a bad mood. It's a bad day. Why are you having a bad day? Well, because of the events that have happened in my day. And it's like, I'm at the mercy of that. There's nothing I can do about that. I'm at the mercy of the things that happen to me. And Albert Ellis said, the great illusion in life is the things that happen to me determines what comes out of me. And Ellis said, oh, no. Oh, no, that's not true at all. The reality is that what comes out of me has way more to do with what is in me than what happened to me. What comes out of me has way more to do with what's in me and what's been stored up in me than what happens to me, namely my thoughts, my ideas, my assumptions, and my beliefs. And Ellis said, between the A and the C, between the activating event and the consequences, is the B, which is my beliefs, my thoughts and my beliefs about the thing that happened to me. My beliefs, that stew of thoughts and emotions and assumptions and conclusions and running conversations and stories that swirl around in my conscious mind, and the thoughts and emotions and assumptions and conclusions that have been stored up in that vast network or reservoir of my non-conscious mind. So last week, as we were talking about this battle in our minds, we talked about 3 levels of thoughts. If you were here last week, on the first level, the highest, the more peripheral level is just our individual thoughts. This is this stream of consciousness, these thoughts that are just passing through our minds all day long at an incredible rate, some of them seeming to just come out of nowhere. Am I right? Our individual thoughts. But then we said, when you think a thought again and again and again, it becomes a pattern. There are patterns of thoughts, well-formed or well-worn paths in our mind that actually become characteristic of the kind of person we are. There's our individual thoughts, our patterns of thoughts, and then there's our non-conscious mind. Our non-conscious mind, which is this vast reservoir of the ideas and stories and memories and assumptions and beliefs. It's like a library. It's a library of thoughts and experiences and partial memories and, fabricated stories and ways that we came to conclusions and so forth. A vast library that has been curated by you since the day you were born. By the way, not a single one of those thoughts or memories filed away. as it had actually happened. We think we file our memories away as they actually happened. Not at all true. Nothing is filed away objectively as it would have been filmed by a video camera or such. They are all filed away with a story and with meaning and with emotion. And that, it's what we think and we believe in our conscious and actually non-conscious minds about the activating event, the results in the consequences that we feel. In other words, it's not the big red F on your math test that makes you feel worthless, a screw up, a failure, you'll never pass, you might as well drop out of school, depressed, I'll never succeed at anything. It's not the F that makes you feel that way, it's your belief and the thoughts that you have about what that F means, what it says about you or me and our future and so forth. Between everything that happens to us and everything that comes out of us are our beliefs and our thoughts about that thing. And Ellis was convinced that many of those beliefs and conclusions and assumptions and stories and things that we've come to, many of those beliefs that are determining our outcomes are not only not healthy and not helpful, they're actually not true. They're not true. From our earliest days, much of what we have filed away and many of the thoughts that are streaming through our minds are actually lies. They're just not true, which is why the first step of winning the war in your mind, and this is the foundational skill. The next 3 weeks will actually build upon this foundational skill. The foundational skill, the first step, we're calling the replacement principle. And the replacement principle simply says, remove the lies, replace with truth. Remove the lies, replace with truth. Now, if you're following along, you're writing that down maybe on the sheet there's a white sheet of paper in your program, you can follow along, or on your app. As you're writing that down, I want us to all say it out loud together, just to get it in our minds. Will you say that with me? 1, 2, 3. Remove, replace. One more time. Remove the lies, replace with truth. Now, the general consensus of pretty much everybody who studies the mind is this: we lie. We lie a lot. And the person we lie to the most is ourselves. We lie to ourselves, and we lie to ourselves about ourselves. We lie to ourselves about our motives and our intentions and what we really meant and our actions. We lie to ourselves about our pasts and our memories and our stories. We invent, we confabulate, which is the term that's often used, with meaning we fabricate, we weave things together, we fill in gaps, we spin stories, and we tell ourselves things that are simply not true. Many of the stories we're telling ourselves are thoughts that defend us and make us more righteous than we actually are, and more right and more superior than we actually are. And at the same time, many of those thoughts attacking us and telling us how worthless and what a failure and how ugly and how unlovable we are. And sometimes I'm having those thoughts at the same time. Like, how crazy is that? Like an egomaniac with an inferiority complex. I mean, how nuts is that? And yet we're all doing it all the time, and it's not true. Those thoughts aren't true. And at the same time, we lie to ourselves about others, about the people around us, about their motives and their intentions and their actions and what they did and what they said and what they meant. Don't tell me what you meant. I know what you meant. I know what's going on. I have pieced this together flawlessly. It is the truth, right? And here's what we know. We hear and see selectively. Did you know that? We hear and see selectively based on the things that we already believe, and we hear and see inaccurately. And if you aren't convinced of the inaccuracy of your own observations and memories, just ask an investigator about the accuracy of eyewitness testimony. It is not high, okay? It's not great, because we see and hear things selectively, and then we tell ourselves a story about it instinctively that is often inaccurate. We assume, we add meaning, we invent, we confabulate, we lie. We lie to ourselves about ourselves, we lie to ourselves about everybody else, and here's the thing, we believe it. We believe the lies, and we believe that they are the truth. I just need to tell them the truth. I'm going to drop a truth bomb on them. Really? We believe the lies. And here's what you need to know. A lie that's believed to be true will affect your life as if it is true. A lie that's believed to be true will affect your life as if it were true, even though it's not true. In other words, if I have these thoughts, I'm such a failure, I'm such a loser, I'm so worthless, then though it is not true, it will affect my life as if it were. If my thoughts tell me nothing will ever get better, it doesn't matter, there's no point, it will affect my life as if it's true, even though it is not true. If I tell myself I'll never be happy, I'll always be stuck, I'll always be a prisoner to this, I'll always be a slave to this, it will affect my life as if it's true, even though it's not true. And if I tell myself lies about others, my teenager, my parents, my friends, my coworkers, that they meant to do that, they were trying to hurt you, they're taking you for granted, they're taking advantage. If I tell myself lies about others, those lies will affect my life as if they are true. And it's these lies about ourselves, about others, about life, even about God, it's these beliefs that actually cause all of the negative and dysfunctional emotions and moods and reactions that we experience throughout the day, limiting our lives, harming our relationships, and as Paul writes in the letter to his second letter to the Corinthians, we looked at last week, ultimately, those lies becoming strongholds that set themselves up against the knowledge of God. And those lies become barriers that are actually keeping us from knowing God and experiencing His healing and His grace, His power, and His calling in our lives. But the good news is, we don't have to let it. We don't have to let it. You don't have to believe every thought that comes through your mind. You shouldn't believe hardly any of the thoughts that come through your mind. You don't have to keep every emotion you feel. You don't have to walk in every mood that comes over you. We have a choice. And as Paul was saying, again, in the letter that we looked at last week, 2 Corinthians chapter 10, he says, we have God-powered weapons. We have weapons that have the power to take down or demolish the strongholds. And he says this, we are not a prisoner of our thoughts, though we sometimes feel we are and sometimes allow ourselves to be. We are not a prisoner of our thoughts. No. We take our thoughts prisoner and we make them obey Christ. Which leads us to something Paul says in another letter that he wrote to Jesus following community in the city of Philippi, which is just a few hours north of the city of Corinth, where he wrote that last letter. This letter is written a few years later, and he says something in this letter that's so important, so powerful, and so genius. It might help you to know, as we're reading this, that Paul, as he writes this, is actually in prison. Because as we read this, it sounds so Pollyanna-ish. It just sounds so positive that we might think, like, where does he live? Like, what's going on in his life? What ivory tower is he penning this from? He's in prison, in his own words, in chains, actually uncertain of the outcome at this time. He has a pretty reasonable concern that he might die at the end of this. And at the same time, the Philippians themselves are going through some real struggle, some serious hardship, which he mentions in the letter. And you can read the whole letter for yourself. It's a fantastic letter. But as he ends the letter, he writes this to them. Check this out. Here's his advice. Rejoice in the Lord always. In other words, in every context, in every situation you're going through, including this one right here, right now, choose joy. And as we begin to argue with him, we're like, what? Paul, where do you get off? And do you even know, what's going on in our country and the state of California? And this is, where do you get off telling us to choose joy? He says it again. He goes, let me repeat myself. I will say it again. Rejoice, which as it turns out, we'll see later in this series, is incredibly good advice for your brain. Then he says this, I love this, reasonableness. Let your reasonableness be evident to all. In other words, reasonableness is what everyone should see when they look at you. Reasonableness is what everybody should see when they look at us collectively, how reasonable you are, how reasonable we are. And then he quotes from Psalm 145. He says, the Lord is near. Psalm 145 says, the Lord is near to all who call on his name. In other words, he's right here with you. Even in this prison, even in this crisis, even in this struggle, even as you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you choose to fear no evil because the Lord is near to all who call on his name. Therefore, he says, do not be anxious about anything, which assumes you have a choice, that this is actually a choice that you can make. I'm not a victim of my emotions. I'm not a victim of my thoughts. I'm not a victim of the activating event. I have a choice in how I will direct my thoughts, and I will take them captive. He says, the Lord is near. Be anxious about nothing, but, he says, but pray about everything, in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, because there are things that I can do about this, and I must do them. And there are things that I cannot do, and I must pray. And prayer is one of the most powerful ways that we sift through those two categories. And we take what we cannot do, and we surrender control that we do not have to God, and we lean into him with trust, and we say, I will do what I can do, but God, I can't do this. I can't change this. At least I'm not aware of how I can. God, I trust you. And he says, and if you do that, here's what will happen. And he's speaking from his own experience. He's like, I know because I've experienced this. He says, and the peace of God. Doesn't that sound good? The peace of God, peace that doesn't even make sense. It transcends understanding. Like, how in the world are you feeling the calm you're feeling right now when you're going through what you're going through? The peace of God that transcends all understanding will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And then he says something that illuminates the how. Okay, because it's like, all right, that sounds really good, Paul. Like, really, like, that's amazing. Positive thinking, whatever. That sounds great. How do I do that? How do I choose joy? How do I block anxiety from hijacking my mind at times for hours on end? And how do I sustain some kind of reasonableness in this sea of insanity and extremes and chaos and so forth? And I'm going to be reasonable. How do I do that? And here's what he writes next. This is so important. Here's what he writes next. He says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever's true, whatever's noble, whatever's right, whatever's pure, whatever's lovely, whatever's admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Now, there's so much content going on there. Let's unpack that slowly. The first thing he says is, finally, brothers, whatever's true. That word true refers to that which is authentic and real and actual, as opposed to that which is imagined and assumed, or that which should be. It just should be that which is authentic and real and actual. Is this true? Is this the whole truth? Now, as I said, many of the thoughts that we have about ourselves, thoughts that we have about others, thoughts that we have about life, thoughts that we have about God, many of our thoughts are not true. They just simply are not true. The problem is, they feel true. Am I right? I mean, it just feels so true. I'm in the middle of this situation and it feels so true, and I'm certain that it is true. What other explanation could there be? What other explanation could there be? Obviously, this is what's going on. Is it true? Is it really, really true? Is it actually true and accurate and rational, or is it only partly true? Is this the whole truth? Is this God's truth about this? Is this true? Is it true? Now, that's just the start. That's the start. That's the basis. And then he starts building on that. Whatever is noble, whatever's noble. Noble refers to that which is dignified, honorable. It's the Greek word simnos, which implies something that's actually kind of awe-inspiring. Like, that is amazing. That's awe-inspiring. Aristotle compared simnos to the Latin word gravitas. It's like, I love that word, gravitas. Honorable, dignified. Is this noble? Even if it is partly true, is it noble? Is this a noble thought? Is this thought leading me to be the best possible, most noble version of myself? Is this noble? Number 3, whatever is right. What's right refers to that which is just and righteous and good. In other words, what's the right thing to do here? What's the right way to go about that? That word righteousness simply refers to somebody who does the right thing in the right way at the right time for the right reason. They make things right. They do things right. It's just the right thing, even when it costs them, even when it hurts. They just do the right thing. Is this right? And then he says, whatever's pure. Number 4, whatever's pure, which refers to that which is faultless, clean, singular, as opposed to duplicitous, sketchy, kind of mixed together, ulterior motives and so forth. Is this pure? This word pure for them would be like something we might see on a package for a product, pure 100% Florida orange juice. It's like there's nothing else in there. There's nothing mixed. It is just one thing. Is it pure? Is this pure? Or do I have some other stuff mixed in with that? Then he says, whatever is lovely. Whatever's lovely, whatever's beautiful and pleasing. This is like that which is pleasing to the eye, to the ear, to the mind. It's that which ignites the senses and brings a smile to your face and a calm to your heart. Is this lovely? Is this lovely? Is this thought lovely? The next word is often related to this word here in Greek philosophy, lovely and admirable. Admirable refers in Greek philosophy to something which was winsome and attractive, or someone who was kind of winsome and attractive, not necessarily physically, but just emotionally. You're just drawn to them in this really good way. Is this admirable? Is this thought stream admirable? If this thought stream I've been having were flashed up on the screen at Terra Nova with my name attached to it, would I be happy about that? Would I be excited about that? Or would I never show my face there ever again? Is this admirable? Is this an admirable train of thought? And then he adds 2 words that capture and sum up the previous 6. If anything, he says, is excellent or praiseworthy. Now that last one always gets me, because some of us have minds, I think, that naturally are drawn to or trend to notice things that are worthy of praise. And some of us have minds that trend towards immediately noticing that which is worthy of criticism. And you probably know which one you are. And if you don't know which one you are, I guarantee the person sitting next to you does. Some of us have a tendency simply to notice what's right, and others of us have a tendency to notice what's wrong. And admittedly, I tend towards the latter, not the former. I tend to focus on things worthy of criticism. This challenges me. This pushes on my thoughts. He says, finally, brothers and sisters, hey, whatever's true, whatever's noble, whatever's right, whatever's pure, whatever's lovely, whatever's admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, he says, that's what you think about. That's what you think about. Think about such things. In other words, that's what you focus on. That's the kind of thing you pay attention to. If your life is always moving in the direction of your strongest thoughts, this is where you want your life moving. So this is where you direct your thoughts. This is what you intentionally bring into your minds and actually build your mental life around. And you take all of the thoughts that don't fit that grid, all of the thoughts that aren't really true. And even if they were true, they're not very noble. And they're not right, not pure, not lovely, not admirable, definitely not excellent or praiseworthy. And you take all those other thoughts and you bring them into alignment and you capture them and you make them obey Christ. Now, here's the point, and we'll build on this. The point is this: you get to choose. That's his point. You get to choose. You get to choose what you will think about, and you get to choose what thoughts you will believe. You get to choose where you will focus your attention. You get to choose which thoughts you will believe, which thoughts you will repeat, which thoughts you will entertain, which is so important because, as we said last week, every time you repeat a thought, it makes it easier for you to think that thought again. And as we repeat thoughts in our minds, we're actually building physical neural pathways in our brain, and we get to choose which thoughts we will repeat, and we get to choose which thoughts we will block and take prisoner. You are not a victim of your thoughts. You are not a victim of your emotions. You're not a victim of your past. You're not a victim of your DNA. And you are not a victim of your circumstances or activating events. You can remove the lies and replace them with truth. So here's what Ellis said. Here's what Ellis says. He says, hey, between the A and the C, between your activating events and the consequences are all the things that we believe. All of the things that we're telling ourselves about the situation, about the other, about ourselves, much of which is not really completely true. I mean, not objectively true and not even rational, he would say. And so Ellis formulated this process called rational motive behavioral therapy, and he added one more letter to his ABCs, the letter D, which stands for disputation, which is a fun word to say. Disputation or disputing. And here's what he said. If your mind is going to fill itself with untrue, dysfunctional, unhealthy thoughts, then we all need to develop the skill of disputing, of arguing with our thoughts. Now, here's where this is really good news to some of you. Some of you are really good arguers. You are excellent at disputing and debating. You have never lost an argument with another person. But now you need to turn your well-honed skills upon yourself. And we all need to develop the ability to argue and dispute with yourself. And today, I want to end by giving you a tool, a process, if you will, to bring this into your life in a practical way this week and hopefully for the rest of your life, how to win the war in your mind, a time-tested method of sparring with your negative thoughts. It's a process I actually learned as a teenager in a drug rehab many years ago and have worked through it so many times, but it is a time-tested and well-worn method of sparring. In fact, the letters actually spell that word, and here's how it works. The S stands for stop. Stop the downward spiral. Because, isn't this true? Our thoughts and emotions often spiral without even our conscious awareness or our approval to the process. And so the first step in sparring is actually to catch it and stop or interrupt that downward spiral. But, this is important, simply trying to stop a negative spiral is never enough. Here's what I've learned from experience. Trying to stop negative thoughts is almost impossible. It is nigh impossible to stop a negative thought without replacing it with something else. It is almost impossible to stop thoughts without replacing them. So that is the first step. I got to catch that cycle. I've got to interrupt it. But then the next step is to probe. The P stands for probe. What's the S stand for? The P stands for probe. The thoughts and beliefs. And here's where I simply ask, what am I thinking right now? What exactly are my thoughts and beliefs? What am I saying to myself? Because our emotional reactions, whether energizing or depressing, whether enlivening and inspiring or defeating, our emotional reactions are actually rooted in the thoughts and beliefs that we are having at the time, the constant stream of consciousness. But we are so often oblivious to that running dialogue and how negative and self-destructive and frankly untrue it can actually be. And so I need to become aware of that. I need to become aware of my own stinking thinking. And I would encourage you to actually, if you find yourself stuck and want to get out, to actually write that down. Stop, catch yourself, and then grab a pen and a pad of paper and say, what are my thoughts about this right now and my beliefs, and actually write them down. Now, you will want to destroy that piece of paper later because it is often filled with insanity and ugliness. But go ahead and write it down. It just clarifies your thoughts and you can see them. It's like amazing. So what's the S stand for? Stop the downward spiral. The P is probe. What are my thoughts? What are my beliefs? What am I thinking right now? And then the A is argue. Argue with those thoughts and those beliefs. Argue with yourself. Begin disputing, and you begin to challenge those toxic thoughts that you're having as being false. And there are so many different ways that our thoughts are false without us realizing how false they are. For example, we have generalizing thoughts. Generalizing thoughts are these all or nothing thoughts, always and never, patently false every single time you have that thought. Generalizing thoughts are thoughts that take one specific thing to happen. I failed my math test. And kind of spreads that over everything else in my life. I am a failure. I will fail every time. Or two or three negative things and just generalizes them over all things that are happening. And I begin to argue with that. I go, wait a minute. It is not all or nothing. It is not always and never. It's not all one thing and nothing of another thing. Life is never that way. It's this one thing. It's just that one thing. Other things in my life are good. I begin to argue with my generalizing thoughts. Catastrophizing thoughts are thoughts that I sometimes have. This is terrible. This is a complete failure. Nothing is going to go right. Life is over, right? And I go, stop. It's not all over. This is not... If I'm not dead, I'm not done. God is not finished. He's not finished with me. He's not finished with the world. He is still on the throne. He has not lost power. Catastrophizing thoughts. If you believe Jesus rose from the dead after he was crucified, catastrophizing thoughts just might be the most anti-God, anti-Christian thoughts that you can possibly ever have. Catastrophizing thoughts, so false. Defeatist thoughts. Defeatist thoughts are like, self-defeating, I just can't do this. I'm a failure. I'll always be stuck in this. I'll always be a slave to this addiction. This will always be my life. And I start to go, wait a minute. That's not true. I can do anything that God calls me to do. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. I am not a slave to this. God has set me free. I'm going to live into the freedom that he already says is true with me. And I begin to argue with those thoughts, paranoid thoughts, assuming thoughts, or of course the thoughts we put on others when we're so sure they meant to do that and they're out to get me and I know what's going on. And I go, whoa, wait a minute. I will not assume on another person. Any assumption is not a true thought. I will not assume on another person's inner world. Only God is omniscient. I haven't even figured out my own inner world yet. I don't even know me well enough to know why I do half the things I do, and I'm going to assume I know why they're doing it. In fact, let me assume they don't even know why they're doing it. I mean, that would probably be a more accurate assumption, right? And I begin to argue with those paranoid thoughts or those assuming thoughts. You argue with yourself. And here's where Paul's thought filter is so very helpful. I begin to say, is this really true? Is this really true? Or am I making part of this up? Is this true? Is it God's truth or just my truth? Is it noble? Is that a noble thought? Is that thought leading me to be the best possible version of myself? Is this right? Is this right that I'm thinking this right now? Is it pure or have I mixed in some of my own baggage with this? Is this lovely? Is this admirable? Is this excellent and praiseworthy? And I begin to push those thoughts I'm having through this filter of what would be the more noble, glorious way of thinking, right? And in fact, Paul's thought filter goes beyond just arguing with myself to taking the next step, the R step. So real quick review. The S stands for what? Stop the downward spiral. The P stands for probe. Hey, what are those thoughts and beliefs? The A is argue with myself and those thoughts and beliefs. And then the R stands for replace. Replace them with a better, healthier, more positive alternative. Now, this is so important because the first three are all defensive. They're all defensive. They're like taking those thoughts captive, trying to stop the downward spiral, trying to figure out what's going on. That is not enough. And here's what I've discovered. I need to go on the offensive with those thoughts. And it is in this fourth step that I now take some new thoughts, some better thoughts, some truer thoughts, some nobler thoughts, some righter, pure thoughts, more admirable and praiseworthy thoughts, and I intentionally bring those into my brain. Truer and healthier and nobler thoughts about myself. And I begin to say things like, hey, if I'm not dead, I'm not done. God has called me. God calls. When God calls, he equips. He's given me gifts. He's given you gifts. He has qualified me. I don't qualify myself. He has qualified you. He is perfecting you. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. God has grace is sufficient. He has not given me a spirit of fear or timidity, but a spirit of power and of love and of a sound mind. His power is perfected in my weakness, which is really good news because I have a lot of weakness and he has a lot of power. And I begin to put truer and healthier and more noble thoughts into my mind about myself. And I begin to tell myself truer and healthier, nobler thoughts about everybody else as well. I begin to say, hold on. I'm sure they did not mean what you think they meant, right? They have a story that makes sense of what they're doing. By the way, every single human being has a story that makes whatever they're doing righteous and like best, right? And so you have that story. I'm sure they have that story. I just don't know what their story is. They may be having a bad day. I start to bring to mind, if they're a person I know pretty well, things that are good about them, things that are praiseworthy about them, and I put truer, healthier, nobler thoughts in my mind, not just about myself, but about others. Quick review. What's the S stand for? Stop. Just stop it. Stop that cycle. Interrupt it. Then I have to P, probe it. A, argue with it, dispute those thoughts, and finally, I need to replace them. I intentionally build a beautiful and, as it turns out, far more productive mind. Now, we are going to pick up right there next week in part 3, but each weekend, we are going to end with a little bit of homework. Some next steps, some things to do this week, because we don't just want to talk about this, we actually want to get good at this. So last week, if you remember, your homework was simply to think about what you think about. Just think about it. You don't have to change anything. Ask yourself, hey, am I excited about the direction this thought is maybe taking me in? But I don't have to change anything. I will just keep thinking it. I'm just thinking about what I'm thinking about. Now, this week, we take it a little bit further. Here's our homework for this week. Number 1, identify one stronghold holding you back. Just one. No need for overachievement. You've got 1 billion, like so do I. Just one. Just pick one. Just one thing. One internal conflict that you're having. One negative spiral you get, like, I just get stuck in my head about this and I can't get out of it. Maybe they're thoughts that you have about yourself. Just critical, defeating thoughts you have about yourself. I'm not good enough. People don't like me. I'm such a loser. I'll never get through this. Defeating thoughts about yourself. Maybe it's a struggle you're having with someone else and the thoughts that you keep having about them. Maybe it's something that's become a bit of a characteristic thought or battle of yours. It's like, man, this has just become kind of like what I tend to fight with. Or maybe it's something that just comes up this week and something happens this week and you're like, that's what I'm going to spar with. Like, that's my one. And you just pick one. Just pick one this week and spar with it. Spar with it. Run through the steps. I'm going to stop. I'm going to probe. I'm going to get out a pencil. I'm going to write down what am I thinking? What are those thoughts? What are those beliefs? I'm going to write them down, as embarrassing as they kind of are. I'm going to put those on paper. You start to argue with those thoughts. You find their flaws and faults, and then you replace it. Step 2, name the truth that demolishes that stronghold. Name the truth. If demolishes are built, or strongholds are built on lies, you name the truth that demolishes that stronghold. What's the better thought? What's the truer thought? What's the healthier thought? What's the nobler thought? And here's what I would encourage you, just as with the P, the probing, you write it down. You actually write the thought down, because coming up with it in your head is really good, but it's not enough, and it won't destroy a stronghold. Coming up with a thought in your head won't destroy a stronghold, because a stronghold is a thought that you have thought over and over and over and over again, sometimes for years after years after years, and you need to name it. You need to name the thought that is the better, truer thought, and then replace that defeating thought with this better thought. I write it down, and then I begin to repeat the new thought in the old thought's place. As I'm finding myself in that loop, I take my new thought and I repeat it as is, the same thought, and I say it to myself over and over again. And when I begin to do that, something amazing happens in my brain, the physical organ of my brain, and that's where we're going next week. Do not miss next week in part 3 of our series. Let me close this in prayer. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, as we look at winning this battle, first we just want to thank you for your grace and your power and your goodness in our lives, because in all reality, you have already won this battle for us, and we are learning to live into what you already say is true. And so thank you for that. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for your patience with us. And thank you for your power to overcome. And so we now ask for that. And maybe right now is just a time where you would say, God, I want to win this battle in my mind. Would you tell him that? God, I want to win this battle in my mind. I want to defeat these lies. I want to remove the lies and replace them with your truth. Just tell him that right now. I want to remove the lies, and I want to replace them with truth. And Father, I pray for all of us, wherever we're at, like whatever we believe, whatever we've been struggling through, that you would just give us the grace that we need this week to bring this into our lives, the wisdom to know what to do with it, and the courage to take next steps as we seek to follow you and your goodness and your truth for us. And I pray that as we do so, your Spirit would lead us into all truth as you promised he would. And I pray that in Jesus' name, amen. Hey, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for joining us online before you go anywhere or you go anywhere. If you got anything out of what we talked about today, love to have you share that with somebody, pass this on, maybe invite them to join us next weekend, join you watching online or join us here in the room. Also, before you leave, Scott and Lyle were telling you about this Connect card. We would love to hear from you. Maybe you started filling it out on the app. Maybe you have a paper form like I do right here. Please take some time, finish filling this out. We'd love to hear from you, get to know you a little bit better, know how we can be praying for you. You can drop these Connect cards and your Fab 4 forms that you hopefully filled out in the baskets on the way out. You'll see a few of them in the room and people holding them. You can also drop offering envelopes in there. By the way, as you're filling out the Connect card, if you're kind of new around Terra Nova, your next step might be to sign up for Terra Nova Tours. Just write Tour Me or something somewhere on this card. We'll get you in to play with that. You can drop that, as I said, in the basket. We've got Serve at the Abbey Day coming up on May 29th. We've got life groups starting in June, so a lot going on, a lot coming up. And so a lot of things for you to jump into and become a part of. I hope you will do all that, but mostly I hope you'll have a fantastic week and join us back next weekend for part 3 of our series. God bless you guys. Have a fantastic week ahead.